them to any node that opened up. This turned the typically stationary advancement method into a game itself, one that allowed you to go against the grain and adjust anyone's abilities to your liking. Only 2 equipment spaces were allotted to each character, one for weapon, one for armor. But once the crafty Riku joined your party, she could customize your arsenal. Not every item could be upgraded, but the underdeveloped ones gained new abilities and often a new name when you combined them with items like marbles, spheres, and potions. The mandatory minigame in 10 was Titus and Waka's favorite pastime, Blitzball, a form of underwater rugby. After a glimpse of the professional sport in one of the opening movies, you went for the championship with the Besaid Aurochs, a good-hearted crew that had lost their first match in the tournament 10 years running. Playing involved both real-time movement and turn-based combat, and once the cup was yours, you could return to the stadium whenever you wanted another challenge. As with many games in the series, Final Fantasy X was adored by some and disliked by others. Fans praised the multifaceted storyline and outstanding graphics. Skeptics detested the flawed sphere system and sometimes unbearable voiceover performances. But rain or shine, few missed out on the series' first installment on Sony's second system. Final Fantasy X sold close to 2 million units in 4 days. It became the first PlayStation 2 game to break that mark, and eventually sold twice that much. It's among the top 20 best-selling console games of all time, and considered one of the best role-playing games on the platform. Square seized this profitable opportunity and finally decided to release a direct sequel to a game in the numbered series. Development began in 2002 with essentially the same design staff, only at 1/3 the size. With the majority of locations and character models being reused from the first game, it took half the time to create. All Final Fantasies have a happy ending, giving X-2 the most energetic opening fans had ever seen.
What can I do for you?
Final Fantasy X-2 was released in Japan on March 13, 2003, about 2 years after the release of 10. It eventually toured America in November. Since the major crisis in 10 was solved, the atmosphere of the world had a brighter, happier feel. Rather than drawing on reverent Japanese mythology, the team used popular culture, anime, and manga for inspiration. As such, the sound of the game needed to be changed as well. Noriko Matsuda and Takahito Eguchi, known for their work on The Bouncer, took over for Uematsu. X-2 continued the story 2 years later, focusing on Yuna and the Gullwings, a group of ragtag sphere hunters scoring all kinds of adventure in the new, eternally calm Spira. The Gullwings were comprised of many familiar faces from 10, and the crew traveled around the world in Cid's Celsius, making X-2 the first Final Fantasy to give you airship access from the outset. Sharing the field work with Yuna was her boisterous cousin Riku and the stolid newcomer Pain. After continually outsmarting their rivals, the LeBlanc Syndicate, Yuna and the girls eventually stumbled across a sphere that contained some startling information. Unsure if the images were real, the Gullwings set off to uncover the truth and hopefully find Yuna's lost love. Along the way, they encountered many old friends, as well as some eccentric new faces. In the 2 years since Sin was defeated, many new groups had risen to power. Among these, the followers of New Yevon had taken back the holy city of Bavel under the judgment of the Praetor Baralai. The Youth League had rallied many familiar troops behind the banner of the mysterious Maven Nuge, and the charismatic Albed entrepreneur Gipple got you started digging in the desert. Although X-2 drew from a number of modern influences, the combat system relied once again on a Final Fantasy classic, job switching. However, jobs were given a fabulous makeover with the addition of dress spheres and garment grids. Garment grids were similar to very small sphere grids with 2 to 6 empty nodes. Dress spheres contained the powers of the various jobs that could be placed on the garment grids. Once equipped, the girls could freely switch between any of the dress spheres on the grid. They could only be changed with adjacent spheres, and much like the previous sphere system, passing through different gates unlocked certain temporary powers. The biggest bonus was that outfits could be changed in battle at any time, for the use of only one ability or the remainder of the fight. This made up for the lack of any additional party members beyond Yuna's Angels by allowing truly masterful characters to shine in a number of jobs. 10-2 featured several classic classes such as Warrior, Black Mage, White Mage, and Thief. It expanded the jobs Dark Knight, Gun Mage, Berserker, and Trainer, and took some liberal departures like Gunner, Songstress, and Lady Luck. Each individual dress sphere earned skills like many other job-based installments with ability points. In addition to the integration of dress spheres, 10-2 also featured a mission-based progression system, rather than the traditional linear path. Although there was a main story to follow, players were given the choice to delve into more or less of it by choosing several tasks that inched the plot along, or provided some other insight on the updated world of Spira. For the most part, the choices Yuna made were irreversible and had a strong impact on later parts of the story, both positive and negative. A large percentage of the game itself didn't adhere to the central plotline, which the player may have missed entirely if their focus was only on following the story. One of the most difficult decisions Yuna made early on was whether or not to side with the Youth League or New Yevon. Multiple endings were also possible depending on the percentage of the game completed. Attaining 100% prompted a bonus ending. When you reached the finale, you had the chance to start over with experienced plus characters that took with them all the items, abilities, and dress spheres that you had at the previous conclusion. Only round 2 dropped the girls back to level 1. Despite the drastic tonal change, 10-2 still had its share of notables. It was, and is, the only game of the core 3D incarnations that featured job switching, as well as the only game in the entire series that allowed you to swap them completely on the fly. In addition, 10-2 is the only direct console sequel in the franchise that featured faces from the original, as well as an all-female cast of playable characters. Join us next week for the only chapter in our 13-part Final Fantasy retrospective in HD. In Part 8, Square brings its community together to journey side by side. The 11th massively multiplayer installment would connect 3 platforms, 12 countries, and let the legions of fans tell their own story online.